Imagine if I told you that all of the information you believe to be accurate regarding Jim Jones's life was actually false. The truth is finally coming out from Mama Jones, and it's why Jim's life went so wrong, why there was betrayal, and why there was mayhem are the things you have been wondering for years. Prepare yourself, because Mama Jones just gave you the answers, and I promise you won't believe who did it all. In a startling new disclosure, Mama Jones is outlining all and everything it's a full-fledged conspiracy, not just a few poor choices, and the truth is darker than anyone could have ever guessed. Prepare to hear the untold tale. What specific actions by Chrissy and Cam'ron behind closed doors caused Jim to be publicly humiliated? What was the extent of their plot against him? Was it really the intention of Chrissy Cam'ron and Jim's closest friends and relatives to topple Jim's kingdom from within? Is the betrayal web still in place? You will never see Jim Jones the same way again, so pay attention, because the truth about to hear will cause everything you thought to be shaken. We're dealing with a betrayal so deep and intricate that it's almost hard to believe it's true. But trust me, Mama Jones has finally come out after years of seeing the devastation. Jim Jones has always been a divisive figure, undergoing public, notwithstanding conflicts, contentious choices, and, of course, indisputable impact on the rap game. The issue of how someone so powerful and confident got into the predicament he is in now has always existed. If you have been following the drama, you are already aware of Chrissy and Cam'ron, two names that keep coming up as Jim's life falls apart. Although you might be asking what's new, the truth is that Mama Jones will now let people understand the mystery surrounding Jim's death for years, his humiliation in public, his job losses. And Mama Jones is making connections. And when she does, she presents an image. Relationship problems were too difficult to ignore. Was Jim truly betrayed to the extent of irreparability by Chrissy and Cam'ron, according to Mama Jones? But what is the truth? The extent of this conspiracy is even more horrific. It involves power, control, and the brutal lengths people will go to completely comprehend the seriousness of this discovery, going beyond mere jealousy or miscommunications. As someone who witnessed Jim's closest friends and family members pulling strings behind his back, Mama Jones says she has firsthand knowledge of it all. In order to comprehend the importance of this discovery, we need to take a moment to reflect on the time when Jim's empire was thriving and he had all he required, including loyalty. It is well known that Chrissy Lynn has always been a contentious public figure and has never held back from voicing her views, particularly regarding Jim's acquaintances and colleagues. It's simple to interpret these connections as tabloid-driven drama. But what if there is more to the tale than what has been reported? The latest revelations depict a person who is obsessed with control and would not think twice about manipulating and destroying to get what they want, Mama Jones said. Then there's Camron, a name that, let's be honest, has always been quite significant in the rap industry and has a lot of street cred. His own empire. Let's take a moment to think about the notion that Jim was being pressured to commit suicide by the people he trusted the most before we delve into the details of how they did it. In addition to discussing trivial topics, Mama Jones is revealing the reality of how Chrissy and Cam'ron purposefully orchestrated Jim Jones's success. Cam'ron has been engaging in a risky game for years. His intentions were never as good as they appeared. Jim Jones is not just any celebrity. He is a renowned figure, a mainstay in the rap industry, and a man who has influenced culture. If someone close to him begins to pull strings behind the scenes, you can know that the consequences will be severe. However, the reality is that it was about more than simply business. It was also about relationships, loyalty, and high-level betrayal. Believe me, it becomes increasingly amazing to realize why this is so crucial the more you research it. He's back, including Camron and Chrissy and those in his inner group with whom he shared everything. Mama Jones's next revelation, however, will fundamentally alter your perspective on these relationships because she asserts that Camron was instrumental in rekindling the spark between Jim and Chrissy, and that it wasn't merely a case of drama or egos operating in the background too. So doubts create chaos and spread rumors. Or was there something darker going on? Or was his ultimate objective to overthrow Jim and create an empire? What connection does Chrissy's role have to Mama Jones's belief that Camron was actually preparing to take Jim's place? According to Mama Jones, Chrissy is driven by a desire to dominate and manipulate Camron to get power. But it goes beyond that. Chrissy felt cut off from Jim's life and work, and she was under pressure to make choices that would undermine the foundation Jim had built. As we move further, it becomes evident that this is not merely a straightforward love triangle or a dispute about friendship. But here's the twist. As we fit the picture together, we begin to see how willful and nefarious this betrayal was. Mama Jones was not only watching from the sidelines as her son's life collapsed, but she was also witnessing Jim's trusted people destroy all he had worked so hard to achieve. Not only was the harm emotional, but Chrissy and Cam'ron's actions were well thought out. Jim's willingness to observe and let this unfold is the question. The glamour give people the impression that they know what's happening behind the scenes, but they are blind to the reality. Years of untold hurt, betrayal, and rage were carried by Mother Jones's voice, which shattered the quiet. Like a storm, she started talking, and as she did, the truth came out, exposing a hitherto untold aspect of the story. It was now about loyalty, trust, and the scope of this plot, not just family issues. Get further into the labyrinth of deceit, manipulation, and treachery that had ripped Jim's life apart. Mama Jones delivered her statements with passion and steadiness. Jim and Camron used to be like brothers, helping each other through good times and bad. However, at some point things changed and Camron became aloof, trapping Jim in the middle. It's time the world learned the truth about what Chrissy, Camron, and Jim were all involved in, because it went ugly. After Mama Jones hesitated for a second, things began to unravel. When Jim would arrive home, he would tell me that he and Camron were no longer on the same page and that things were becoming heated. Chrissy would constantly, as if she were attempting to cause friction between them. Now it was about her power and her notion of what ought to be. It was no longer just about Jim and Camron. At first, I observed it all with a mix of anguish and shock as she went on to explain how Chrissy's manipulation progressively impacted Jim's when people start to change. He starts to view Jim as a stepping stone that will help him progress in the game and establish place. She didn't understand she was ruining Jim, but she wanted him to be everything she wanted him to be. So the weight of her words hit him hard. She wanted him to be the man he used to be, but instead she wanted him to look like the man she thought the perfect man should be. I recalled Jim sitting on that couch and gazing off into space. Not because of the music or the business, but rather because of Camron and Chrissy, the two people he trusted the most, who were all attempting to mold him into the person he once was. The two of them began tugging at Jim from separate directions like a perfect storm. Wasn't always like this. Mama Jones shook her head and said, "There was a time when faith was a faithful friend, but devotion has its limits." The most agonizing part was that Jim was too focused on his friendship with Camron and his love for Chrissy to notice that they were planning to harm him and set him up for failure. Mama Jones described how old wounds were reopened, how new ones were made, and how Camron's relationship with Jim soured. No one ever paused to ask Jim what he wanted, but he was forced into their ideal of who he should be. The betrayal was now evidently about a long-standing friendship that had degenerated into something toxic, not just a physical relationship. Both Chrissy and Camron began to emotionally and physically remove themselves from one another. When it all fell apart, Jim was the last to know because his devotion to his friends, family, and fans was being put to the test. And no one was there to tell him the truth or show him what was truly going on behind the scenes. Mama Jones said, her voice cracking a little, The turning point in my life as his mother was when Mama Jones realized that Jim was not the same person she had known before, just because of the betrayal. It was painful to witness that she was in control of the situation without Jim even realizing it. After witnessing everything that had happened to Jim, I could not keep quiet because the truth was so overwhelming. It was no longer just about Jim anymore. It was about the harm that Chrissy and Cam'ron had caused to him, to us, and to everything we had built together. Loyalty is a problem because when the wrong people use it, it can be your greatest strength and your downfall. Chrissy and Cam'ron were better at the game than anyone else, and they knew how to use Jim's love. Jim was too good for me, Mama, Jones said in a steady but very emotional voice, and I saw my son, the one I raised, the one I loved, change into someone I didn't recognize. And it wasn't just the pressure from his career or his fame, but also the people he had led into his life, people who didn't act in his best interests. As the tension increased and the drama developed, Mama Jones realized that the fight was far from over. But in the end, Jim was the one who paid the price. And the weight of the betrayal became more and more intolerable every day. I'm not doing this for fame or retaliation. I'm doing this because Jim deserves to know the truth, and the world deserves to know who Chrissy and Cam'ron really are. They believed they could destroy him and get away with it, but they underestimated one thing: family. She would not keep quiet for Jim, her family, or herself any longer. The truth would eventually be revealed. We need to discuss the chaos that followed Jim Jones's life as it fell apart due to betrayal. This was not just a public split or a simple argument between this was the collapse of an empire that Jim had spent years building. But what happens when the people you trust the most end up pulling you down? Ask Jim, and what do we know about the situation? That's the full extent of the betrayal. According to Mama Jones, the emotional damage wasn't merely for show. It hit Jim where he was most hurt, as shown by the way his music career had begun to slow down. But it wasn't just age or shifting fashions. Rather, it was the harm done by his closest friends and family who he thought had his back. Beneath the scenes, Chrissy and Cam'ron were working to make sure Jim would lose his favor, and the results were disastrous. When it became clear that Jim's legal team was involved, it should come as no surprise that legal action was taken when a prominent individual was attacked in this manner. According to Mama Jones, Chrissy and Cam'ron threatened to sue Jim, but not for the reasons you might think. Instead, these lawsuits were part of a larger scheme to keep Jim in the dark, drain his finances, and trap him in legal red tape. One point, Jim was thinking about going public with, as Mama Jones explains. Jim hesitated because he still didn't want to think the worst about the people who had been closest to him. But Mama Jones, being the protective mother that she is, didn't have that. He had a huge lawsuit of his own that would have exposed the truth about the shady dealings he claims Cam'ron and Chrissy were involved in, bringing the dirty laundry out into the open for the world to see. And what could have been more satisfying than that? Jim Jones's biggest mistake, as we all know, hesitation kills careers, was watching Cam'ron, the master manipulator himself, be forced to answer questions about his role in this whole mess. By the time he realized what was really going on, the financial collapse had already occurred. But let's not forget about the money. When you've spent your entire life achieving success and someone comes along to ruin your reputation and relationships, the financial toll is unavoidable. Luxury saw right through it. While Jim was distracted by the drama, Cam'ron and Chrissy were secretly arranging deals that siphoned off his wealth. Imagine being at the top of your game. According to Mama Jones, Cam'ron and Chrissy were largely to blame for Jim's financial decline, pulling strings behind the scenes to make bad business decisions, invest poorly, and ultimately bleed money. Which is what happened to Jim when his ventures failed and his assets were not only had the public backlash destroyed Jim's financial stability, but it was the real monster because, as we've seen in countless scandals, social media has a way of magnifying the rumors once they start. Let's not sugarcoat it, but Mama Jones says that Cam'ron and Chrissy weren't innocent and were planning Jim's demise. It wasn't just a financial decline, it was a crash, and the two people he thought he could trust the most were responsible. Even more shocking is how quickly public opinion changed, with people beginning to question whether Jim was actually the villain in all of this. In the media frenzy, everyone was playing the blame game, but Mama Jones reveals that Chrissy and Cam'ron were far from innocent in the court of public opinion. They weren't just victims in the story. The public was divided, with some supporting Jim because they believed his entire career had been ruined, and others supporting Chrissy and Cam'ron because they felt wronged. The public's erratic behavior allowed them to manipulate the narrative and feed the media machine with false information and half-truths to ensure that Jim took the brunt of the blame. Jim was rapidly being portrayed as a loser who couldn't manage his personal and professional lives. But Mama Jones has refused to accept that story, insisting that Jim wasn't only the victim of personal betrayal, but also of a deliberate effort to damage his reputation. Did he deserve the backlash, or did he bring this upon himself? Don't blame Jim Jones for his current situation. It was a well-thought-out plan by those who claimed to care about him the most. The real cause of the chaos wasn't just Chrissy and Cam'ron's egos. It was about control. They wanted to see Jim fail because they wanted to replace him, and they were driven by the need to destroy everything Jim had built so they could rise from the ashes. Cam'ron wanted to become the game's kingpin again, and Chrissy did nothing but help him pull the strings. What does this mean for Jim Jones now that we know everything? Will he ever be able to move past the harm that Chrissy and Cam'ron have caused him? Or is it too late for him to make a comeback? Mama Jones has voiced her thoughts, but do you think Jim will rise above the ashes, or will his career be doomed? Did Chrissy and Cam'ron ruin his life, or did Jim just play right into their hands? Lastly, do you think there is a chance that Jim will turn his life around? If you feel the weight of this shocking truth and want to stay informed, please leave a comment below. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next bombshell that is about to be revealed. Remember, that isn't just gossip, and we're just getting started. So you can bet that we'll be digging even deeper into this and uncovering more shocking facts that you won't hear anywhere else. Leave a comment, subscribe, and check back soon for the next shocking revelation. Let's talk about actual events in the comments section below. Since nobody in the scandal world remains silent for long, let's see who you believe is truly to blame for this mayhem.